Before we get into any of this, I need to warn you that this video has very violent images and spoilers of the entire film. So if you haven't seen this film, go and watch it and then come back and watch this video. So the beginning of this film starts within a few hours from the last scene in part 1, which is incredibly badass. But it's all a dream. Paxton is living in constant fear that the Elite Hunting organization will find him and kill him, which they do. I love all this, but the only thing I can complain about is that they should have killed his girlfriend too, because he told her everything. So half of this film is pretty similar to part 1. It's about 3 American backpackers traveling through Europe who get tricked into going into this hostel so rich businessmen can pay to torture and kill them for fun. But the spin on it is that they're girls, which means a lot less female nudity, but we still get some. And I like these characters a lot more than the guys in part 1. Bajor Phillips' character is pretty much like Oline Paxton though, horny and trying to get laid. But I like Bajor Phillips as an actress, so I don't mind her. And we don't spend too much time with the Whitney character, but she's like this incredibly dorky, innocent woman who gets the absolute worst and painful death in the entire series. It's also the most stylistic kill of the franchise. It's a great scene. Everything with how they set her up to die is sad, scary, and well executed. The main character is Beth, played by Lauren German. I had to look up who this actress was a few years ago, and she's the hitchhiker in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. This actress and character is likable. She's not a bitch, but she's also not a pushover. But the other half of the film, we follow the 2 rich American businessmen who have paid to kill Beth and Whitney. We get to see their entire journey as they bid and win these girls. That's a crazy scene when all these people are bidding on who gets to kill them. Going through these men's journey, we get to find out that this is their first time killing someone, and they think it's going to change them for the better. Some kind of animal instinct other men will just sense from them. But the whole time it feels like Todd is pushing Stewart, who is just going along with it because of peer pressure. It's very similar to Paxton pushing Josh to have sex with the hookers in part 1. I've listened to the audio commentaries of both movies, and Eli confirmed in this movie that Todd and Stewart are Paxton and Josh if they had never went to the hostel and just kept living their lives. They would just keep coming to Europe every year, and eventually buying hookers and drugs would just get boring to them and they would want to step it up. Todd is representing Paxton, the one who's super pumped about it and really wants to kill these girls, but when it comes down to it and he puts his skill saw on Whitney's face, he sees the reality of the situation and that this is an actual human being, and he freaks and completely backs out. I think the absolute best moment of this film is when he's crying in the elevator. It's just an incredibly powerful scene, and it feels so good that at least one of these buyers sees what he is doing. Then when the elevator opens, the dogs come out and tear him to shreds. I love all this. It looks like for a minute Stewart is going to back out, but then he snaps. I think seeing him snap is so funny because I know guys like this who are the shy, passive type, who you just know hate their wife or girlfriends, and when they snap, they really fucking snap. But she gets the better of him, cuts a deal with the organization, and buys her way out and cuts off his dick, then kills the woman that betrayed them. Listen, I think this is a great sequel, and I love this film, but I don't think it's perfect or better than part 1. Part 1, the last half, was so intense, dark, and violent. And the last half of this film is very violent, but it loses its intensity once Beth cuts off Stewart's dick. That's a good scene and great practical effects like always, but it's comedic to me. For me, the biggest fault in this film is how Beth kills that woman. She cuts off her head and then the bubblegum gang uses it as a soccer ball. It's a violent scene, sure, but it's so comedic. I do love to see the bubblegum gang return though. Talking about the bubblegum gang, there's a scene where one of the men who work with the Elite Hunting makes the kid choose one of the kids for him to kill. It's obvious to me that Eli was inspired by the scene in City of God where they shoot the child in the foot, but this scene doesn't even come close to matching the intensity of City of God. For this scene to work, the performances need to be great, and you can't blame the kids for bad acting because they're so young, but it doesn't work and it just feels fake. I think this is the worst scene in the film because at least in the end, the decapitation is comedic, and this isn't trying to be comedic, it's trying to be serious, and it fails. I think for the ending, Eli Roth knew he couldn't match the intensity of part 1, so he went with comedic violence. It's not a horrible ending, probably the best we could get, but I just love the ending with Paxton in part 1 so much more. But what this film gives you that the first one doesn't is that it shows you the entire process of the Elite Hunting group. Granted that part 1 is scary because you don't know how it works, and part 1 establishes just enough at the end so you can understand what it is, but this one the mystery is gone, so it completely dives into the business. And that to me is the scariest part of this story. How it's just a business. I think this film also dives deeper into how scary and unsafe it can be to travel abroad. I think the scene where they're on the train and they meet those guys is pretty scary. I've met girls who have traveled around Europe using the Metro Pass, just like these characters, and they said it was kind of terrifying. There's so many scary guys on there who want to take advantage of them. Eli Roth said that this scene is inspired by a European film called Night Train Murders. I watched it and I loved it. It's basically Last House on the Left, but on a European train, but I definitely recommend it. Like I said earlier, in some ways this film works better, but in most ways it doesn't. It does have some genuinely intense moments, mostly in the first half, and it is more violent and bloodier than part 1, but it also has a little bit too much humor at the wrong places for me. It's basically the ending that takes this film down a notch or two for me. But like I said, I get why he went this way. But overall, I think this is a great film. This is definitely one of the greatest horror sequels ever made in my opinion. It explores the lure of the business and expands the sick but believable world that it created in part 1. We have to give Quentin Tarantino some credit on that. He really pushed Eli to show the entire business of the Eli hunting. Even though this is Eli's film, Quentin was a big part of pushing him to make it and gave him a lot of creative support. Speaking of directors, I want to mention that Rogerio Diogado, the director of Cannibal Holocaust, makes a cameo as a cannibal in this film. And I forgot to mention that Takeshi Miike made a cameo in part 1. I know that Eli loves Cannibal Holocaust, so do I, and Takeshi Miike's film Audition was a big influence in making part 1. I love the film Audition. I highly recommend it. I really love Todd and Stewart as characters. Everyone told Eli that the most interesting part in part 1 was the scene where Rick Hoffman was a customer, so he really dived into that, and it came out great and actually has something meaningful to say about these type of men. I think that's what makes this film unique and not your typical horror sequel. Yes, it gives you everything it promises, more blood and kills from torture scenes, but it dives into the psyche of these customers who pay to kill people. They're scary because they can be anyone that we know. That's what I really like about these two films. They're completely grounded in reality. You know that there are sick fucks in the world that would pay thousands of dollars to kill people, and something like this business has probably existed. So that's my review on Hostel Part 2. I'm Jacob from Cinema Junkies. Thanks for watching, keep watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and follow me on Instagram, cinemajunkies_. Don't forget the underscore.